You know, Senator Tester, you're talking about some of the more remote places, and if they're smaller, are we not being as vigilant? I mean, the bad guy's job is to find those weak links, if you will. You know, we're seeing this play out in rural America. We're seeing it on our reservations. We're seeing it in remote places like Alaska, where you have potential for a captive market out in very remote areas. I was just out on Kodiak Island. Kodiak is it's the second largest island in the United States. It happens to be the third largest fishing port by volume in the country. So there's a lot that goes on in Kodiak, but in fairness, its population about, I don't know, 5,000 people or so. But what has happened is it is a very, very convenient market for the bad guys, those that want to move their drugs, to have this captive market coming in, and they cultivate it, and it ruins the community. You know, Kodiak is a pretty resilient little community, but we've got some drug issues that most Alaskans would just not want to believe exists. And the deal with Kodiak, it is an island. There are no roads in, so you are either flying the drugs in by small plane or the two commercial airlines that are there, or you're bringing the stuff in by the mail. So you would think that we would be able to see very clearly where it comes in and intercept and choke it off. And so I want to ask some questions. And Mr. Hentz, your focus there on the role of the technology and what we can be doing and how we can do more with just smart technology in detection. So the question for you is, the focus is really on these higher volume ports of entry, and I understand that. But I also recognize that when you have smaller communities that the legs are literally cut out from underneath, when you've got drugs that are available for perhaps the first time ever. Community of Quinnahock, 800 people, four fentanyl overdoses, 1 death. Quinnahock is so far removed from most of America, people don't even know it exists. And so I want to make sure that as we're focusing on choking off that source of supply in these bigger ports, that we're not moving our focus also away from these smaller ports of entry, whether it is Anchorage, which in our view is pretty big. We see things coming in through the cargo terminal there at Anchorage, 5th largest in the world. And so how we are using the technologies in places that are not as high profile within the agencies to make sure that we're not cracking the door too far open in the more rural areas of the country. And this is not just Alaska, but in places like Montana as well. Are we getting the resources that we need, whether it's dogs or whether it's the technology? Or is the focus going to be, we're going to look at the higher volumes here, and we're just going to hope that we get it so that it doesn't come in the door because we lack sufficient resources to do all the tracking at all the places that we need to do? It's kind of a broad-ranging question, but it goes to the heart of my problem, which is we're not a very big population, but we're getting impacted like everybody else in the country, and we're a pretty attractive market for these bad guys that would prey.
Right. Senator, thank you very much for the question. So for the $6 million that the committee was able to give to S&T for fiscal 2018, let me tell you a little bit about how we're managing that. First of all, there's a lot of very basic science that has to be conducted. So unlike our explosive detection capabilities that you might see in our airports, those larger ports of entry, right now there's very educated explosive detection libraries, for example. However, when it comes to something like fentanyl, there are no repositories, no national libraries of signatures, trace detections, or anything like that. So the fact is, the basic science has to be done. And that's not something that an infusion of resources can necessarily accelerate. There are literally hundreds of combinations of fentanyl and analogs that might find themselves finding their way into our population. So the first thing we have to do is make sure that the standards work that we're doing in partnership with CBP and ICE are products that can be translated into areas like Alaska, Montana, New Hampshire, and otherwise. So first, we want to make sure that those first responders, that the equipment that they are procuring is appropriate in the area of detection. We need to ensure that those detection regimes are just as solid as our explosive detection regimes. So to the extent that
But what you're saying is that that changes. And so the question is whether or not we are current with those technologies.
So right now, working with the requirements that we have from CBP and ICE, we have a very good focal point of activity that we're going to go after. But then there's also the work that we'll do at the Chemical Security Analysis Center that will additionally inform other ideas about where emerging compound elements that feed fentanyl are coming from and what we can anticipate in those smaller market areas as we become more educated in the big markets like Detroit is where Ranking Member Capito talked about. So as we become smarter in those areas, there will be a natural evolution, as Ranking Member Tester alluded to, where the adversary will go to other markets. We need to get in front of that. And the way that we're going to do that is by developing a sound portfolio of research and development. We're going to work with the interagency, both the DEA, Department of Defense, and others, to ensure that those artifacts get proliferated into those smaller market areas.
My time has expired, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Yep.